Verse 17, for their word will eat as doth a canker. You know what a canker is? A canker is a corrosive sore. It's like rust. You get rust on your car and it's not long before the whole thing's covered with it. Right? Especially living in Michigan. Verse 18, verse 17, and their word will eat as doth a canker, of whom is Hymenaeus and who? Is Paul identifying who should be avoided? Don't do that. You can't do that. That's contrary to Christian love and charity than to say to somebody you shouldn't hand out that person because they might be dangerous. You can't do that. That's not gracious. That's not loving. That's not whatever term you want to use for it. You know what God's attitude is about that? He says you stay away from those people because they'll overthrow your faith. They'll subvert your family. They'll do all of these things if you give heed to their doctrines of devils and endless genealogies. Don't even listen. Don't go. When you know who they are, do what? Avoid them. Chapter 4, verse 10. Chapter 4, verse 10. For Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and departed unto Thessalonica. So he names Demas. Verse 14. Same chapter, verse 14. Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. The Lord reward him according to his works. Paul does not operate on the normal, Christian psychology that you have to, just sing kumbaya with everyone and all get along and roast marshmallows around the campfire. Now, I'm not saying, you need to not misunderstand me. Am I saying that we should go out and be mean, ugly, rude, and nasty? I'm up here right now and I'm preaching and I'm trying to do it with authority and stuff like that. But if somebody came into my midst and I sat down and had a personal conversation with them, I certainly wouldn't talk to them like I'm saying now. Because there's a difference between dealing with people individually and preaching the Word. You want to know what part of the problem is? Part of the problem is there's too many preachers who are too yellow-skinned to say what God's Word says. Because they're too worried. They're willing for the shilling is what they are. Don't say that, Brian. Listen, if you can, I'm not mad at anybody in here in particular or any of that sort of thing. But God's Word is God's Word, and we need to have the same attitude about things that God has. And God says you need to identify who those people are. You need to mark them because they're dangerous. They're dangerous to your faith. They're dangerous to the doctrinal integrity of your family. They're dangerous for you as a believer to sit there and listen to that stuff all the time. Because if you do, it's just going to make you shipwreck. It's going to run you into the reef. Come back with me to Titus chapter 1. Let's go to verse 12. Quickly now through verses 12 and 13. He says in verse 12, one of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, the Cretians, those are the people that live on Crete where Titus is at, are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. All right, well, what does that mean? Well, we have to approach this verse, when we approach this verse, we need to ask the question, with respect to whom is Paul writing in the immediate context? Okay? Well, look at what the verse says. In verses 10 and 11, he was warning Titus that there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers on the island of Crete who are getting paid to gainsay or speak against the truth. Okay? And we further saw that Cretan Jews, or the circumcision, were vigorously trying to subvert the truth through teaching the law. Okay? Now he turns his attention to a different group. In verses 12 and 13, these pertain to the native people of the island of Crete, not to the Jews that had moved there. All right? Paul quotes one of their own prophets. So he's quoting a Cretan prophet here. So he was familiar with their philosophy and so forth. And he does it to demonstrate to Titus the character of the people that he's dealing with. Look at verse 12. One of themselves, notice, even a prophet of their what? Own. So Paul is quoting here a Cretan prophet, right? Said in verse 12, the Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. So that is this Cretan's estimation of his own people. Okay? Now, always, it says, always means perpetually, incessantly, invariably, at any and every time. So, are they always like this, in other words? Yeah. So, in other words, the Cretan prophet is commenting on the normal lifestyle of the Cretans. All right? Now, he says first that they're what? Liars. So the Cretans were continual liars, which means they were constantly uttering falsehoods. Number two, he says that they are evil beasts. The words here convey the meaning of bad and corrupt brutes or wild animals. Okay? Simply stated, the Cretans possess all the brutish and fierce, characteristics of evil beasts. So in other words, were they refined and dainty people? No. They acted and behaved like a bunch of what? Animals. Now, remember, who said that? This Cretan prophet, right? And then he says, thirdly, that they're what? Slow bellies. The Greek word translated slow means free from labor or lazy. Okay? Bellies, in this context, is talking about a glutton. A man who is all stomach. In essence, the prophet is calling the Cretans a bunch of lazy gluttons. Okay? So understand what he's saying about them. Now go to verse 13. What does Paul say? This witness is what? True. Paul says, yep, got to agree. Got to agree. The Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and what? Slow bellies. So from Paul's own time on Crete, he has to agree with the comment of this prophet. Okay? That's an accurate description of what the Cretans are like. Now think about that. Who is Titus trying to minister to? He's trying to minister to a bunch of guys who are always liars, behave like evil beasts, and are a bunch of slow bellies, gluttonous lazies. Could probably have an easier crowd. Okay? Now notice what the verse says. Verse 13. This witness is what? So because that's who the Cretans are, he says in verse 13, wherefore? So on the basis of the fact that the Cretans are always liar, evil beasts, and slow bellies, wherefore rebuke them what? See? Because of the nature of the character of the people on Crete, Titus is dealing... let me start over. Wherefore, because of the nature and character of the people Titus is dealing with, I left out a word, sorry. Paul instructs Titus to rebuke them sharply. The word rebuke means to chide, to reprove, to reprehend for a fault, to check by reproof. Now, for the sake of time, I want you to go to one passage, and that's in the same chapter. Go back up to verse 9. Holding fast the faithful word, as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to do what? Convince. See that word convince? That word is the same word that's translated rebuke in verse 13.